It started on a night that felt like any other. Quiet. Still. The kind of night where the wind barely moved the trees and the stars blinked a little too bright in the sky, like they were trying to tell a secret. Clara had just finished washing the last of the dishes, her fingers wrinkled from the water and her mind tired from the usual weight of everything. Work, bills, and that quiet loneliness that never seemed to go away no matter how many lights. She left on. But something about that night felt different, as if the air had shifted, as if the world was waiting. She was closing the back door when she first heard it, a soft hum, not mechanical, not quite natural either. It sounded like music and static at the same time. When she stepped out onto the porch, her heart stopped. There, in the middle of her backyard, was a glow, not fire, not a reflection. It pulsed gently, as if alive, and in the center of it was something, or someone. At first, Clara thought it was a child, small, fragile, curled up like it had fallen from a great height. But as she stepped closer, the glow dimmed and the figure came into focus. Its skin was a smooth silver blue, and its eyes, oh those eyes, were wide, shimmering pools of deep violet. It didn't speak. It didn't cry. It just looked at her like it already knew who she was. Clara should have called someone, the police, the news, anyone. But she didn't. Instead, without understanding why, she wrapped the small being in the old quilt she kept on the porch and whispered, "It's okay. You're safe now." That night she didn't sleep. She watched over it, him, she decided, like she had with her son all those years ago. But unlike then, this time she wasn't afraid of being alone. She felt needed, chosen. Over the next few days she learned things she never could have imagined. He didn't speak out loud, but she could feel his thoughts, images, emotions, dreams. He missed his home, wherever that was, and he was scared, but he trusted her. Every time she reached out, he reached back. Not with words, but with something stronger. Connection. He began to mimic her smile, her laughter. He followed her around the house, fascinated by everything. Spoons, soap bubbles, the way water ran from the faucet. And slowly he became her son. She named him Leo. It meant bringer of light in a language she made up just for him. And Leo, he lit up her world in ways she didn't know were possible anymore. But of course nothing that bright can stay hidden forever. It started with the car that parked across from her house, unmarked. The man who knocked on her door claiming to be from the census. The way her phone started picking up strange interference. Clara knew something was coming. She had seen enough sci-fi in her life to understand the pattern. But this wasn't fiction. This was her life now. And she wasn't going to let anyone take him away. She started planning, looking for places to run, ways to disappear. But Leo, he started changing. Not just in little ways. His eyes glowed faintly at night. His laughter echoed like a song across the walls, and sometimes things in the house moved when he was upset. Even if he never touched them, Clara didn't care. He was hers, and she was his. But one night, everything came crashing down. A sharp light filled the sky brighter than the moon. It hovered silently above her backyard, just like the night she found him. And Leo, he stood at the back door, eyes wide, reaching toward it, not in fear, in longing. Clara's heart broke. She realized then what she had been avoiding. Leo didn't belong here. Not really. He had a home somewhere out there, one she couldn't give him. And no matter how much she loved him, she couldn't hold on to him forever. Tears blurred her vision as she knelt beside him. She took his small hand in hers and whispered, "Do you have to go?" He looked at her, not with words, but with a warmth that wrapped around her like a blanket. He didn't answer. He didn't need to. And then she asked the question she hadn't let herself say out loud until that moment. "Can I stay with you too?" Leo looked up at the sky, then back at her. And just for a moment, Clara thought she saw something shift in the stars, as if the universe had heard her, But before she could understand what it meant, before she could take one step forward toward the unknown, there was a knock at the front door. Not gentle, not friendly, and the light outside vanished. She turned, heart racing, knowing that whatever came next would change everything. Clara froze. The knock came again, this time louder, more urgent. Leo gripped her hand tighter, his small fingers trembling. Her breath caught in her throat as she slowly stood up and turned toward the front of the house. For a moment, the silence stretched so thin it felt like the air itself might snap. Whoever was on the other side wasn't leaving. Clara glanced back at Leo. His eyes were glowing faintly now, just like they did the night she found him. It wasn't bright enough to light the room, but enough to remind her he was different, special, and someone else must have known it too. She crept quietly to the front door, her footsteps careful on the old wooden floorboards. The porch light buzzed softly as she peeked through the curtains. A man stood there, not a neighbor, not someone she recognized. Tall, dark suit, hands in his pockets like he wasn't in a hurry. His car sat at the edge of her driveway, black, sleek, and empty. No license plate. Clara didn't open the door. She didn't say anything. But the man, he seemed to sense her watching. He turned slowly and looked right at the window. His eyes were sharp, too calm. And then, as if he was just dropping by for coffee, he said loud enough for her to hear, "Miss Holloway, we'd like to speak with you about your son." Her heart stuttered. She hadn't told anyone about Leo, not a soul. She never took him out in public, never called a doctor, never mentioned him online. So how did they know? And more importantly, who was we? She backed away, pulling the curtain shut. Leo was behind her now, standing quietly, watching, with those curious glowing eyes. Clara dropped to one knee, brushing a strand of hair behind his ear. "We have to go," she whispered. Leo didn't ask where. He didn't speak at all. But he nodded. Clara didn't grab much, just her wallet, keys, a small backpack already packed with essentials. She had kept it by the door for weeks just in case. Some part of her always knew this day would come. Leo slipped on a hoodie that covered most of his unusual features, and she wrapped a scarf gently around the lower half of his face. Enough to pass for a child with a cold. Hopefully. They exited through the back, staying low and quiet as they moved through the trees behind the house. The forest was dense, and she knew the back roads well. Her old Subaru was parked on the far edge of the property, near the shed where her late husband used to store tools. She hadn't driven it in weeks, but she prayed it would still start. They made it to the car without being seen. Clara buckled Leo in, her fingers shaking as she turned the key in the ignition. The engine coughed, then roared to life. Relief flooded her chest, briefly. As she pulled onto the dirt road, headlights flared behind them. Her grip tightened on the wheel. She didn't speed. That would be too obvious. But the car behind them didn't try to pass. It didn't get close. It just followed. Clara kept her eyes on the road. Her mind raced. Every turn, every back route she knew by heart. She headed away from town, toward the hills. If she could just get far enough, maybe she'd have time to figure out what was happening. Beside her, Leo stayed quiet. But she could feel him watching her, feel the strange warmth he always gave off when he was scared but didn't want to show it. After nearly an hour of weaving through old roads, she finally pulled into a long-abandoned campground. Weeds had taken over the paths, and the wooden cabins were crumbling. It had been shut down for years, no cell service, no cameras. If there was any place left in the world that could keep them hidden, it was here. She parked behind a collapsed storage shed and cut the engine. The silence rushed in like a wave. Only the chirping of insects and the rustling of trees remained. Clara stepped out, scanning the tree line. No sign of the black car. Maybe they'd lost them. She helped Leo out of the vehicle and led him toward the largest cabin. It took a bit of force to get the door open, but once inside she propped a chair against it. Dust blanketed the furniture, and the air smelled of wood rot and time, but it would have to do. They sat on the floor, near the old fireplace. Clara wrapped a blanket around Leo and pulled him close. Her hands were still trembling, but she tried to speak calmly. "Who were they?" she asked, more to herself than to him. Leo tilted his head slightly, like he was listening to something she couldn't hear. Then for the first time in days she heard his voice, not out loud but in her head. "They're not like you, they don't want to help." Clara swallowed hard. "How do you know?" "They came before. They took others." Her breath caught. "Others? Like you?" He nodded slowly. His eyes looked older now, sadder, as if he remembered things no child should remember. "Are they looking for you?" she whispered. "Yes, but not to send me home." Clara pulled him closer. Her mind raced. If they weren't here to help, what did they want with him? She looked around the old cabin trying to think. There had to be someone she could trust, someone who could help. But who? And how much could she even explain without sounding insane? The quiet creak of a floorboard snapped her thoughts in half. Clara tensed. She reached for the small flashlight in her pocket and clicked it on, aiming it at the doorway. Nothing. She rose slowly, heart pounding. "Stay here," she told Leo, her voice barely above a breath. She crept toward the hallway. The cabin was falling apart, but the back room still had doors. Maybe animals had gotten inside. Maybe the wind had knocked something loose. But as she turned the corner, she saw it. Footprints in the dust. Fresh, and worse. They were small, like a child's. She spun around, flashlight darting across the hallway. Empty. No sound. No movement. But the feeling in her gut told her they weren't alone. When she returned to the front room, Leo was standing, staring out the dusty window. His hand was raised, almost like he was reaching for something. "What is it?" Clara asked. He didn't answer, but she felt the shift. The air grew colder, and from somewhere far beyond the trees came a soft humming sound. Not loud, not close, but getting closer. She stepped beside him and followed his gaze. Lights flickered deep in the woods. Not flashlights, not headlights. They moved like fireflies, but wrong. Too steady. Too fast. Clara's voice cracked as she whispered, "Are they yours?" Leo didn't move, but his next words echoed in her mind, heavier than before. "They're not here for me." She turned to him, confused. "Then who?" He looked up at her with those glowing violet eyes. "You." Clara stared at him, her chest tightening. "Me?" she whispered. "Why would they come for me?" Leo didn't answer right away. He looked back out the window, his small hand pressed to the cold glass. Outside, the strange lights moved closer, weaving through the forest like they were searching for something or someone. Clara's thoughts spiraled, fast and messy. She'd spent weeks worrying about keeping Leo hidden, protecting him from the world. It never crossed her mind that she might be a target, too. Leo turned to her, his voice echoing softly in her head. "They saw. The night I came, they saw what you did." Clara's mind flashed back to that night. The light, the hum, the moment she reached for him instead of running. She thought she was just acting on instinct, on love. But what if that choice connected her to something bigger? Something dangerous? A branch cracked outside. Clara's heart jumped. She moved toward the fireplace, looking for anything that could work as a weapon. Her fingers curled around an old iron poker, heavy with rust. It wasn't much, but it was something. "We need to leave," she said, trying to keep her voice steady. "We can't stay here." Leo's eyes dimmed, like a storm cloud had passed behind them. "They're already here." Before she could speak, the air around them began to vibrate. Soft at first, then stronger. The floor trembled under her feet. It wasn't an earthquake. It wasn't natural. It felt like something pressing in from every direction, like a signal trying to burst through her bones. Suddenly, from the corner of the room, a soft light flared. Not from outside, from inside. Clara turned sharply. A figure stood in the doorway of the cabin's back room, but it wasn't the man from the road. This one looked different. Faded, not entirely solid, like a memory brought to life. It was a woman, tall, pale, dressed in something that shimmered, like moonlight. Her eyes, though, they looked almost human. Almost. Clara stepped in front of Leo instinctively. "Who are you?" she demanded. The figure didn't move, but a voice filled the room. Not from the woman, not in English, but it wrapped around Clara's mind the way Leo's voice sometimes did. And somehow she understood. You were not meant to interfere. Clara tightened her grip on the iron poker. He was alone, hurt. You think I was just going to leave him out there? The figure's gaze shifted to Leo, then back to Clara. He was left behind for a reason. He carries more than you understand. Clara's stomach turned. He's a child. He is not. The words hung in the air like smoke. Clara glanced at Leo, confused and suddenly unsure. He looked small, innocent. But there was something else behind those eyes now. Something she hadn't wanted to see. "What do you mean?" she asked, her voice cracking. "He is a key. To worlds. To memory. To weapons lost." Leo's hand slipped into hers. She felt his fear, his sadness, but she also felt something else, something buried deep. Power, maybe, or something older. "I don't care," Clara said firmly. "He's mine. I'm not giving him to you, or anyone." The figure faded, not all at once, slowly, like a candle flickering out in the wind. But her voice remained for one last moment. "Then they will take you instead." And then she was gone. The room returned to silence. Leo gripped Clara's hand tighter. He didn't say anything, but she could feel how badly he wanted her to believe he was still just Leo. Her Leo. But Clara's thoughts wouldn't stop racing. Was he really just a child? She looked at him again. Same silver blue skin. Same wide eyes. But now she remembered little things. The way he moved without touching. The way the lights flickered when he was upset. The things he knew without being told. Outside, the lights had stopped moving. They hovered now like they were waiting. Watching. Clara stepped back from the window and sank into a broken armchair, her mind buzzing. She had to think. There had to be more to this. She remembered the man at the door. The one who said he wanted to talk. What agency did he work for? What did he know? Maybe they weren't from the government at all. Maybe they were something else. Watching. Waiting. For people like her to do something. Unnatural. Her hand brushed against the inside pocket of her coat. She pulled out a small folded photo. One she always kept close. It was old. Faded. A picture of her and her husband, Mark, from years ago. Back when life was quieter. Normal. She thought about how he used to talk about space. About time. About things that made her roll her eyes back then. He would have loved Leo. Clara looked at the boy beside her. No. Whatever he was. He still felt like her son. He still looked at her the way a child would look at someone they trust. But now trust wasn't enough. A sudden loud bang shook the cabin. The door shuddered. The chair propped against it slid an inch. Clara jumped to her feet. Leo moved behind her, clutching her coat. A voice boomed through a speaker outside. "Miss Holloway, we need to come inside. Please don't make this harder." Clara's blood ran cold. The voice didn't sound angry, but it didn't sound kind either. It was cold, trained. Like they'd done this before. They were close now. Probably surrounding the cabin. She didn't know how many of them there were, or what they wanted exactly. But she knew she couldn't give them what they were here for. The door rattled again. Another bang. Then a second voice joined the first. Softer, calmer. Clara, you don't understand what you've done. That boy is dangerous. Clara stepped closer to the door. Her voice was quiet, but steady. He's not a boy to you, is he? There was a pause. Then, no, he's not. Clara felt Leo's small arms wrap around her waist. His face pressed against her back. She could feel his pulse. Fast, terrified. The voice outside continued. We're not here to hurt you, but we can't let him leave. He's a signal. If others come looking for him, it won't be like this. It'll be war. Clara shook her head, her throat tight. Why me? Why not just take him from the beginning? Another pause. Because you bonded with him, and now he's connected to you. If we try to remove him, it could kill both of you. Clara's breath caught. They knew. They understood more than she did. And they were still coming. She looked down at Leo. He looked up at her, his face pale, his eyes pleading. Not for escape, but for something she didn't quite understand. Forgiveness? Permission? Another bang. The last piece of the chair broke. Clara turned to him and whispered, What, are they not telling me? And Leo's answer in her mind came slowly, as if it hurt to say, Because if I leave you, I break. And if I break, the sky does too. Before she could ask what that meant, the front door creaked, half open now. Voices stepped closer, and, somewhere far above them, beyond the trees, the sky began to hum again. Clara held Leo close, her heart pounding like it would shatter her ribs. The door was nearly open now, and footsteps echoed softly outside. She didn't know how many there were. She didn't know how much time she had left. But she knew one thing with absolute certainty. She wasn't going to let anyone take him. Not like this. The hum above them grew louder, stretching into a low vibration that trembled through the wooden beams of the old cabin. Leo's small hands gripped her tighter, his eyes shut like he was trying to hold something inside. The air felt heavier, dense, like something was building, something old and enormous. Then, just as the door began to creak wider, Clara whispered, Leo, if you have to go, you don't have to do it alone. He opened his eyes and looked up at her, and this time there was no glow, only tears. For a second, he looked just like a scared child, just like any other boy who didn't want to be left behind. His voice echoed gently in her mind, smaller than before. You would really stay with me, even if it's not safe? Clara cupped his cheek with her shaking hand and nodded. Always. And then, without warning, the light outside vanished. No bang, no crash, just silence. Even the hum faded like a switch had been flipped. Clara looked toward the doorway and found no one there. The forest beyond the cabin was still. Not empty, but still. No black car, no men in suits, no agents. Only the quiet hush of wind through the trees and a low mist rolling in, like the earth was letting out a long breath it had held too long. She stepped forward slowly, holding Leo's hand. They both peered outside, waiting for something, anything to jump out, but nothing did. The world had changed and yet somehow stayed the same. Behind them, the cabin groaned with age, but no longer with fear. Leo, Clara said softly. What happened? He looked up at her, eyes clear now. They were never in control. They thought they were, but someone else was watching. Clara frowned. Who? Leo didn't speak right away. Then slowly, he lifted his hand and pointed toward the sky. Them, he said aloud this time, his voice small but certain. Clara followed his gaze and saw it, a shape moving through the clouds. Not sharp, not metallic like the usual UFO stories. It was soft, like light bending around itself. Silent. Watching. Leo took a breath. They're not here to hurt us. They only wanted to see what I would become, what we would choose. We? She asked. He nodded. Me and you. Something clicked inside her then. Maybe this was never just about saving him. Maybe it was about the connection they made. A human mother and a child not of this earth, but still filled with need, fear, and love. They didn't take you because I made a choice, she said quietly. They were testing you, Leo replied. They test everyone. Most don't pass. The sky shimmered again and the shape began to rise higher, fading slowly into the stars. Clara squeezed his hand. What happens now? Leo was quiet for a moment. Then he said, I think they're giving us time. A chance. For what? To live. That word hit her like a wave. After all the hiding, the fear, the long nights with a blanket over, the windows and no phone signal, he said it like it was the simplest thing in the world. A chance to live. They didn't go back to the cabin after that. Clara packed what little they had and drove south. Far from the town, far from anyone who might still be looking. She found a small place tucked near the mountains. Quiet. Remote. Just enough signal to get by, but not enough attention to attract eyes. No one asked questions. Leo went by Leo now. His glow faded slowly over the months until he looked just like any other boy. Almost. He was still quiet. Still thoughtful. Sometimes at night, he would stare out the window like he was waiting for something. But he smiled more often, laughed at silly cartoons. He learned to ride a bike, helped Clara build garden boxes, and once asked if dogs existed on other planets too. Clara never stopped wondering what the men in black wanted, or who that woman in the cabin really was. Maybe she was a projection, maybe something else, but none of it mattered now. Because every day she woke up and found him still there, still safe, still smiling, was another answer in itself. One night, months later, Clara sat on the porch with Leo curled up beside her, wrapped in a blanket. The stars above them blinked, silently, peacefully. Do you ever miss where you came from? She asked him. Leo was quiet, then said, I don't remember what it felt like, not anymore. Just pieces. Is that scary? No. He leaned against her shoulder. Because now I remember this instead. Clara blinked back tears. She never thought she'd find peace in a story like this. She never expected love to look like this. But it did. It was messy and strange and beautiful in ways she never saw coming. The sky remained still. No more visits. No more tests. Just stars. And in that quiet, Clara finally understood. Love wasn't just about protecting someone from harm. It was about choosing them, again and again, even when it was terrifying, even when the world didn't understand, even when it meant leaving everything behind. She looked down at Leo, kissed his hair and whispered, We're going to be okay. And he smiled like he already knew. Behind them, the porch light flickered once, just a glitch, or maybe something else. But Clara didn't look back. She didn't need to, because for the first time in a long time, they weren't running. They were home.